It was in film school that I first came in contact with this saying: fast, cheap, good, pick two. When I first heard this saying, I found it to be kind of interesting. Then I thought about it more, and it sort of became dubiously useful. And the more and more I thought about it, the more I realized it's completely devoid of merit. No artistic, interesting thought was put into this. And if you don't understand the saying, the gist of it is, if you want to make a movie fast and good, it's gonna cost you a lot of money. It ain't gonna be cheap. If you want to make a movie good and cheap, it's gonna take a lot of your time. You can't do that fast. And if you want to make a movie cheap and fast, it ain't gonna be good. And I think that last one is the one that irks me the most, because when I see this saying, I have one question: who decides what this means? Who decides what good means in filmmaking? Because there's a whole lot of filmmakers out there that don't have the money to make something anything but cheap. So that leaves them one option. They got to make it long and drawn out over time. But there's people in this world who work multiple jobs. They only have a day off a week. They only have time after work to work on creative stuff. And even that is divided amongst family and romance and this and that. People don't have much resources, whether it's time and money. So what this saying is saying to me is the people who are disadvantaged in this life, people who come from groups or poorer classes or stuff like that, people who don't have the resources to make a movie, they're only going to make bad movies. Because in a lot of ways, time and money go hand in hand for most people. There's not many people who have infinite money but no time, and there's not many people who have infinite time but no money. Because if you're in either of those situations, you're struggling in some regard. And I think going back to good here, I think the pretension of saying something is not good. I've said this before. I think we have a broken value system in film. I think the value system of film is you have to make something cinematographically perfect in order for it to be good. It needs to have the perfect cuts. It can't have bad audio. It can't have this and that. The technical is what decides the good. And simply put, I don't find that at all to be interesting. I don't find it to be intellectually truthful. I find it to be just the laziest route to think about art. That's like looking at paintings that are only the closest to real as possible and saying that's a good painting. Then you look at a Picasso or you look at a Van Gogh and you're like, no, those guys, they did bad paintings. That happened too fast. You could tell they did it fast and they didn't spend a lot of money on that bad painting. They needed to spend way more time and money on that. And I think cutting filmmaking off at the expensive or the belabored is just limiting filmmaking so much. And much to the chagrin of the handful of critics I've amassed with my films, which are often made fast, cheap, and well, I think that those people have sort of trained themselves out of something that I think is so crucial in art and filmmaking and anything. And that's an inherent love for creativity and an inherent appraisal of people chasing and pursuing the creativity they want to pursue. The people who criticize my work, they're free to do that. The people who take up arms against the way I choose to make movies, even though it's the way I blatantly love to do it and I have a blast and I'm doing it with my friends and we're all loving it and tons of people are being affected by these films, you're at the wrong parties, guys. Hey, you know, you gotta go to different parties. These movies are parties for people who don't want to overthink the thoughtlessness, the joy of thoughtlessness, the joy of letting yourself go to something, the joy of just believing in yourself and taking the dive, and the crowd that gathers when you do that and cheers you on. That's what this filmmaking feels like to me, and that's where the good becomes defined for me. The good is that carelessness. The good is the willfulness to just do it. I do it every year with my Oscars contest. I tell people to shoot a movie in 3 hours. And if you were to ask people who use this here saying, if these movies were made fast, cheap, and good, they'd say they're not good, because otherwise that blows up this whole stinking filmmaking system we've built that needs to be expensive. It needs to be belabored. And I wholeheartedly disagree. I think those Oscar movies are amazing because you see the joy, you see the beautiful stupidity, you see people getting together and making something despite their lack of time and their lack of resources. And I think if that could plant a seed in those people, which I have seen it plant a seed and that seed grows into beautiful trees, people have made amazing features coming off the legs and heels or whatever of their Oscars movies. And I think that's just one way you could see how things can be fast and good, because that inspiration is a hell of a lot better than a lot of, I don't know what you could call it, that Madam Web did. You know, that movie took a lot of time, it took a lot of money, it didn't turn out good. So you have all these Hollywood examples of movies that adhere to this system. They're expensive and they take a lot of time. And somehow they don't turn out good. So what did they do wrong? And I think what they did wrong is they lost that spark. They lost that joy. And I think, I'm not quick enough to think of an alternative to this. But I don't think we really need rules like this, because I think if you hold yourself to stuff like this, you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot. You're gonna overthink. You're gonna not let yourself go to the filmmaking, because when you're working at this level, whether it's my speed, which I don't know what fast even is at this point, because I've spent months on end on movies this year, and I'm like, that doesn't feel fast to me. Like spending 2-3 straight months on a movie feels like a lot of time of my life, you know. If I'm looking at it from my perspective, I'm like, that's not fast, you know. And compared to the Oscars movies, which are made in 3 hours, that's definitely not fast. So this whole scale feels relative, and some of my movies this year cost a couple thousand, upwards of $10,000, which is a lot of money for me. I'm like, I've never come close to that for my movies. So I'm like, these movies don't feel cheap to me. So whose scale are we going on? So not even just the good. Who decides what's fast? Who decides what's cheap? You know, if you only have Sundays, that's only 52 days a year for you to make a movie. 52 days, that is not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things, but at the same time, that's like almost 2 months. The movies I've poured my heart and soul into this year took that time. So if you could devote just a fraction of your free time to a movie, you can make something relatively significant, at least in your capabilities. And I don't know. I don't want to go too hard on people, because I think this saying, ultimately, like I said, is dubiously useful. There's an inherent truth to the fact that it's like, okay, if you're not spending a lot of money on something, you got to spend a lot of time on it. Like there's a value there. You'd ideally, in an ideal world, be like, okay, I want to sit down with this project, but it depends what the project is, and I think that's something the saying also ignores. It's if your movie's an honest monologue of how you feel about that week in your life, you got to make that fast, and there's no reason to spend money on it. Just sit in front of a camera and monologue. If the movie's a 2-person movie set in a hotel room over a weekend, just shoot it in a weekend. You know, like, why do you have to really belabor that experience? Of course, if you're trying to make a superhero movie, you're gonna want to pour money and time into it. Of course, if you're making your grand opus, your Synecdoche, New York, you might want to take a moment to think. But even then, thinking can be the thief of just creating. I think we talk ourselves and think ourselves in circles sometimes. And I'm coming to you from the depths of this 12 features project. I have almost 10 movies shot, so close to 10, a few days away from 10 movies shot. And a lot of editing on my plate for the next 2 months and change. And I just don't want you guys to think for 1 second that there's any limitation beyond yourself that can stop you from doing what you want to do. It sounds cheesy, it sounds lame, but I think it's what people need to hear. Look at my stop motion movie this year. It's janky. The animation is just little action figures moving every 6 times a second, you know? But I think I accomplished exactly what I wanted to tell, and it's a very big scale story. It's like, you don't need to limit yourself. If you got a sci-fi movie idea, find the way you can do it now. If you have to downscale, literally, if you have to tell it with action figures, if you have to use my EB-Synth animation style, if you have to do anything like that, you could bring it to life. I think the sky's the limit. I think people who say work within your limitations are creating a lot of limitations in their minds. I think, of course, limitations are beautiful, and all of my work is birthed out of and smartly adapted around limitations. But ultimately, I think the word limitations will lead you to believe you're more limited than you are. I think limitations are merely it's a very technical thing. It's like, which spaces, which people do I have access to? Those are your limitations. The concepts you want to explore, you could get as grand and big as you want, or as small and granular as you want. Just go for it. Just go for it. Because it's fun. It's fun to create. Every time I'm shooting a scene, I'm just looking around. I'm like, how lucky am I to, get to just make movies with my friends, detached from any bullshit, detached from anyone telling us what to do, any meetings, any approval. No, we're just going and doing it, and we're all laughing and having fun and making either the silliest stuff or the most heartfelt stuff and just expressing ourselves. And I hope you could find that version of filmmaking for you, something that is freer and better than what you've been sold, because I think it'll make you feel good if you open yourself up to it. So whatever I just said, I hope some of it landed. I love you guys, and I love movies. I'm going to sleep. Big editing day tomorrow, as always. Toodaloo. Bye-bye.